All right, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So we're going to dive into the One Piece review here in just a minute, but I want to just do some quick channel stuff before we get into it. So I was meaning to do some video read-throughs this past weekend, but I was catching up on some games and I didn't feel like it, so I put it off until this week. Hopefully, I'll get back to the read-throughs at some point this week, but there's also a heat wave warning where I am, so we shall see what that does because I don't want to have a loud fan running and try to talk over that. But yeah, stay tuned for that. Hopefully, it'll materialize sometime this week. On top of that, Kaiju's coming back this week, so expect a video for that as well. So without further ado, let's dive into it with One Piece Chapter 1058, New Emperors. And I'll preface this by saying this was not like an exceptional chapter by any means, but it was such a fun chapter because we're finally away from Wano, and it reintroduced some fan favorite characters and one of my favorite characters especially. So I enjoyed it a lot. So let's get into it like usual. I'll go from start to end, going over my thoughts and everything. Again, Germa cover story. I don't know what the point of Caesar being here is. Like, unless he's gonna get captured by Big Mom again, I guess he's gonna reunite with Judge and they're gonna reform, part of the science team they had. I don't know. It feels like Oda's just, having him around until he decides what to do with him. So, whatever. But yeah, we have Germa 66 is an Emotionless Excursion, Volume 17. Take Me With You, Get Me Out of Here. By Eiichiro Oda. Translation Stephen Paul. Lettering by Vanessa Satone. So we pick up in the. Come on. Why are you doing this to me? Come on. No, sorry. I thought this was the Buggy stuff, but no. So we pick up with the Straw Hats sailing off, and these gags were tired and old like 5 arcs ago. So Oda trying to go back and mine it for new content again. Like he's getting scraps at this point. Like none of these jokes really land as hard as they did the first couple of times. Especially, again, I've voiced my frustration with this. Nami trying to pretend to be all serious, taking Luffy to task, being like, oh, you're so irresponsible, you're putting us in danger. After the 100th time where Luffy does shit without consequence and no one takes it seriously, you can't really expect me to laugh or get invested in the joke being like, ha ha ha, Nami's mad at Luffy for not taking things seriously and risking all their lives. Like, when this bitch went and got one-shotted by Kaido and was tossed into prison, I talked about how I hated that moment so much because the Straw Hats were all sitting there, slurping their soba, being like, he'll be fine, no worries. I'm sure Luffy will be okay. Like, so when you give me shit like that, don't expect me to be like, oh, Nami's righteous anger, like, yeah, she has a point, ha ha. Like, none of it lands. And the same with Jinbei, like, Jinbei being the one to take it easy and be like trying to laugh it off doesn't really land because again, Fishman Island, Jinbei's whole thing was getting mad at Luffy for not paying attention when he's trying to tell him like, hey, these are the changes that happen in the New World. Pay fucking attention because you're the captain. You have to take care of your crew. And Luffy just kind of like gave him the finger, told him to jog on and walked off. And the crew had to be like, oh, ha ha, no, Jinbei's like, take it easy. We are listening to it for him. Like, I think this joke would have been funnier if Nami and Jinbei were both just double teaming Luffy and beating the crap out of him for being a shitty captain. But this just feels like Oda wanted to give, like, Jinbei some more, I guess, personality, for lack of a better word, so he just shoehorns him into a gag. But, again, none of it really lands. But yeah. Honestly, by far the worst part of this chapter and any chapter going forward is shitchy. Like, I just wish at some point someone would just put his shoes in some cement, tie him up, throw him overboard, and let him drown in the ocean. Like, I just want him off the ship because he just fucking infuriates and annoys me every time he's on screen. Like, out of all the gags and stunts, like, his have gotten the most grating, and it just gets progressively worse over time. And then we got the bounty reveals. Again, at this point, bounties don't really do anything for me because they're so arbitrary and meaningless. Like, again, like, they don't really... Like, it's like, yeah, the whole thing is like, oh, government, like, the government bases them on threat levels, etc., etc. But the moment that bounty hunters ceased to be like a credible force in the series, was the moment when bounties also just lost all meaning to me. It's like, all right, you get bigger and bigger numbers, and I see how that some people could hype that up, and you're like, oh my god, it's a big number, but it just doesn't hold the same weight and heft as it did when Luffy was first setting out. You know, he's the underdog rookie, kind of climbing up the ranks. It doesn't hold the same weight now as it did then. So it's kind of like, all right, we get the tired old gags of, you know, some of them are really happy with their bounty, some of them don't like it. I don't know where the hell Frankie's gag is supposed to be going with, you know, his picture getting replaced with a Sunny. I doesn't make sense. Poor Usopp freaking out over his getting higher is kind of amusing. Robin not giving a shit is also kind of amusing. But yeah, apart from that, it's like, although I love this gig solely because it sees Shitji just getting so mad and angry and just getting crapped on, and I love that. So I love the gag that Jinbei and Zoro have both beaten him in bounties, especially since Jinbei just joined the crew and he's already got a higher bounty than he does. And people are pointing this out in like the threads and everything, that, you know, fucking Sanji took out, Queen took out one of the Yonko commanders, and Jinbei only took out who's, how come he's got a higher bounty? As long as Shitji's miserable, I don't care what the reasoning is, that's all I need. But yeah, bounties are kind of like, again, like they're not hype to me anymore. Which brings us to, though, the actual hype parts of this chapter. We finally get the return of my favorite, if not one of my favorite characters in the series, Sir Crocodile. And despite my lofty ambitions for him not being fulfilled, and all my theories being for naught, I am absolutely okay with his grand reintroduction into the series being the reveal that he masterminded Cross Guild, that he recruited Mihawk into it, and these two style icons are just living it up, torturing the hell out of Buggy, making him absolutely miserable as he's begging and pleading for his life. Like, oh, I love that so much. It's so good to see Crocodile finally back in the series, because those of you who've been following me for a while know how much speculation and theorizing I was doing based on, you know, when Crocodile's coming back and wishing for us to see him again. So I'm super happy he's back into the story, even if, you know, it's probably going to shift away focus from him again until Oda needs to move him into play for whatever plot he has. But so happy to see my fan favorite again. I don't know if I actually mentioned this in the review video I did for that chapter, but yes, of course, we get the reveal. That thing should come as no surprise to anyone, which is Buggy is absolutely just the figurehead for Cross Guild. He was not the mastermind behind it. He didn't do any intricate planning. He didn't even... he kind of lucked into it, I guess. Well, he lucked into his bounty more so than he lucked into the guild itself. But I love that this Croc and Mihawk are both so pissed that Buggy's taking credit for their work, and that the government thinks they're his peons, that they're just torturing the shit out of him. Oh, I love it. Love to see Buggy just getting humiliated, because that's the thing, like, Buggy will continually fail upwards in life, but that has to be counterbalanced with his karma of always also getting his shit handed to him, and just him having, like, the worst luck ever to counterbalance his rise to stardom. So I'm glad we're getting that. Of course, all of his crew are just immediately turning heel, like, pledging allegiance to Croc and Mihawk instead, because they're just like, yeah, we're just, you know, with Buggy riding his coattails, we don't really give a shit about him. Which brings us to one of the interesting reveals of this arc, which was that apparently Crocodile went out and actively recruited both Mihawk, or not, just, I guess it's just Mihawk, because he went out to recruit Mihawk, and then he was went to collect his debt from Buggy. So I love that reveal that, you know, he apparently had his ear to the ground. He figured out the Marines were making their move, and he decided, you know, this is the best time to try to get Mihawk on his side. Before this chapter, anyone that knows me knows I'm not, like, big into shipping, apart from, like, the one or two ships that'll stand for life. This chapter is, like, the perfect example of, like, the community meme of the Dean going, you know, this better not awaken something in me. That panel of, you know, Croc and Mihawk sitting their legs crossed, torturing Buggy, was my awakening moment. Because before this chapter, I'd never even considered or thought about, shipping Mihawk and Crocodile together. I thought never even crossed my mind. And after this chapter, I am 100% behind it. Like, fan for life, no matter what. So send me all your Croc Mihawk shipping fan art, because I am 100% behind it now. This is just like Giga Brain take from Oda for planting this idea. But yeah, really, really love that. We'll talk about some of the Navy stuff related, Marine stuff related to that over at the end of the chapter. I do have some thoughts regarding that. Mihawk being called a Marine Hunter is kind of funny because, again, people pointed out that, it's a contrast to Zora being the Pirate Hunter. But yeah, again, this just makes me wish that bounty hunters were more of a credible like force or threat in the series. I feel like Mihawk would absolutely be, one of the top bounty hunters in the world. Like, I feel like, that's what he would do is just like, to support his hedonistic wine lifestyle is he'd go, get a really big bounty, go cash in some expensive wine, and then go retreat to his castle. So I wish we had some of that. Then we get the reveal that, yes, apparently Crocodile had given Buggy a loan to start his guild, do the whole thing. And it turns out he just squandered all the money because, of course, he did, and Croc's here to collect. I love it. And, of course, Buggy's like, licking boot as fast as he can to try to get Croc not to kill him. And he tells him, he'll be his slave. And then Buggy's fortunes just go down from there because Croc's asking about, the Cross Guild poster. And of course, because all of the, fool underlings under Buggy still believe in his false myth, his false mythology. So of course they thought he was a mastermind behind it. And so that's why the reason that he was printed on the poster of Cross Guild, the Marines mistook him as the leader. Fun little reveal. We get more bounty stuff again. Like, it's like, all right, yeah, Mihawk, of course, as a super high bounty, like, makes sense given that, the circles he runs in. I think Crocodile finally has a legitimate threat bounty to his name. Because I think this has been, again, a topic of speculation for the longest time in the fandom that Oda, I don't know if this was an actual quote from Oda, or this is just fans speculating on it, but if a lot of fandom were like speculating early on that, or were saying, falsely claiming that Oda was saying that he introduced Crocodile too early, and so he basically had to nerf him in the fight against Luffy to make it believable that he won, but Croc was like supposed to be a bigger powerhouse. So I feel like, the fact that he's masterminded all this, I think Croc has earned the higher bounty, even if people are like, oh, how the hell come he went from 80 million to, 1.95 billion? Was it 80,000? No, it was 80 million. Was it 80 million? Yeah, it was 80 million. But like I said, I feel like it's earned. And so Mihawk, of course, has the brilliant idea of like, yeah, you know what, let's make Buggy the figurehead so he can deal with all this shit. He can get the Marines' ire and everyone else's ire, and we can just work in the background doing whatever we want. And Croc's just like, yeah, sure, you know what, I can make that small sacrifice. And poor Buggy's life of misery begins now. And then we see the Revolutionary Commanders again. This was kind of like, again, like at this point, I don't know what the point of the Revolutionaries is at this stage in the series, because they haven't been seen to really do anything much towards like the liberation of the world, or like, enacting grand plans. Like, again, it feels like Oda had a bunch of ideas set up with them being like, oh, we're going to investigate like where the weapons came from, etc., etc. And it feels like, he was going to introduce that in Wano at some point, but then he felt, it's taking too long, I don't have time to introduce it properly, whatever. So it feels like he just dropped that plot line, decided to move on to something else, which now becomes the whole thing of like, oh, wondering what happened to Sabo. I think it's hilarious that Dragon apparently trusts Sabo so little, or has so little faith in his second in command, that he thinks he would actually go and kill King Cobra. Right? And he's just like, oh, if he does, like, oh, I'm gonna spank that boy. But I don't know, it's just really funny. Nothing much more to say there. And then apparently Sabo was giving them a call. This is the one part that gets me. Like, the Marines were like, oh, our island is, was so well hidden. Like, maybe this is because they are forced to Move. Hopefully you can't hear the dogs barking outside. I've got my window open. But like the Marines were forced to move their base. Like Blackbeard found their hideout and told the Marines about it. So maybe it's because of that. Like, oh, they had to abandon like all their equipment, whatever, blah blah blah, when they moved to Kamabaka. But I feel like they would have some kind of like jamming device or something so the Marines can't pick up on their frequency the way that they are doing right now. You're like, I feel like if your thing is, you're the enemies of the Marines, you don't want them to know what you're doing, what your plans are, you should have some countermeasures in place so that they aren't able to just spy on you and listen in on your calls. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I guess Oda just added that in just, for dramatic flair so you can set up stuff. But that kind of brings me to, I guess, the only large point I want to discuss with regards to this chapter. And that's the question of what the hell is Oda doing with the Marines? Because I talked about this in the couple of earlier chapters where, it feels like Oda's steadily downplaying the Marines as credible threats, in the upcoming final war, conflict, whatever. Especially because, a lot of fans, when, the war system was abolished, like, a lot of fans were expecting, like, the whole science division being announced, the fact that there's supposed to be a replacement for the emperors. It felt like we were going to get the reveal of, like, the Pacifistas 2.0, the upgraded new whatever weapons the Marines have, to kind of showcase that, they're a force to be reckoned with again. And that Akaino's, like, hardline stance is actually going to, require some alliances among pirates to fight back against them so they all don't get eradicated. And yet, we've consistently, the message we've seen and heard of the Marines is, we don't have the firepower for this. We don't have the manpower for this. We can't do anything. And like Akainu just making empty threats, being like, oh, I'm going to take down all the pirates. Oh, I'm going to do this and that. And it's like, all right, but if every single panel or scene we see of you is you having failed in your mission and your objectives, like, why are we supposed to think you're a credible threat? Like, on the one hand, like, yeah, it's really cool to see that, Crocodile apparently outmaneuvered the Marines, was able to get Mihawk on his side, was able to make him join the Cross Guild, and all that, like, sunk all the machines, and he inadvertently helped out Buggy as well before, Buggy went into hiding so he doesn't have to pay off the loan shark. But again, like, all right, now this just makes the Marines more incompetent because, like, all right, they set out to get the warlords, and so far, they seem to have failed admirably at securing any of them. Like, unless the next couple of chapters reveal that Hancock and Weevil have been caught, I don't think the damage to the reputation is going to be able to be fixed easily. And I don't. The other part of that issue is, like, if Hancock is the only one that was caught, that presents a whole other set of issues or another can of worms, having the only female warlord be the only one that was captured. But like, we'll get into that if and when that happens. But that's part one of it. Kind of like, all right, I don't know what Oda's like trying to do with the Marines or what he's doing, because it really reminds me of what he was doing with the Giants, where he's like, oh, the Giants are some of the greatest warriors on the seas. Big Mom's like, oh, if I had a giant army, I could have become the Pirate King, and I could have found the One Piece by now. Like, blah blah blah. And yet every single giant we've seen or been introduced into the series has been jobbed so easily. Like, there hasn't been a single giant that's actually put up a fight or been seen to be a credible threat to anyone when they've all been one-shotted so easily. And it feels like we're in the same range with the same issue with the Marines now, where Oda's trying to pretend like, yeah, the Marines are here to fight. No, like, oh, they're doing something. Like, oh, we have to be careful. And it's like, no, they're just failing to achieve any of the mission objectives they sent out to do. So I don't know if Oda's going to rectify that at some point, or again, if this was just another like drop point where he's like, I have to pick up the pace, I have to move things along, so I just kind of have to, change things on the fly as I go. But yeah, a little bit disappointing with regards to that. But yeah, apart from that, post-arc again proving that it's some of the best content in the series. I think most of the hypest moments have been, outside like the peak emotional stuff has always been in the post-arc reveal, so I'm looking forward to getting some more of that. So yeah, we'll hopefully see if the next chapter also delivers on that as well. And a lot of people have also rightfully pointed out this is the first time, I think, in a decade that we do not know where the Straw Hats are going next. I think a lot of people are theorizing based on the last chapter of, like, hurling themselves over the waterfall, that the Sunny would take enough damage that they would need to go find Adam Wood to fix it, and that would set their destination for Elbaf. But Frankie, this chapter's been like, nope, damage wasn't too bad, so it's still up in the air. Looking forward to that. So with that said, I will end the video here. I think this has been one of the more shorter ones I've managed to record recently. So yay me. Yay me. As always, if you like my videos, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I would really love to reach 169 subscribers because, yes, that number. Like I said, look for some read-throughs coming this week. And until next time, this is Ash. Talk to you all later.